Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. My guest this week is Aryel Gladden-Banning, an operations consultant who works with solo advisors and small teams in the RIA space. And when it comes to efficiency and systems, Aryel is a veritable genius. And so today we're talking about something really specific, which is about the prospecting process. Now, if you have ever felt uneasy about following up with a prospect, whether you're worried about coming across as too pushy or too salesy, or you're just not sure what to say or when to say it, this episode is going to give you some really strategic insights. Aryel and I are diving deep into the full prospect process, and more specifically, the top mistakes that are costing you clients that you probably don't even realize yet. So we talk about why your prospect process is actually one of the most powerful marketing and leadership tools in your business, which I think is interesting because until I met Aryel, I didn't really think about the prospect process. So everything that happens in between a lead booking a discovery call with you and them actually becoming a client, I never really thought about that as an opportunity to show leadership, and Aryel has really changed my mind about this. And so that's what we're getting into. The mistakes that you're making that are unintentionally eroding your sense of leadership throughout this process, and how your prospects are viewing you as a leader before they're ready to become a client. So we're getting into what to do when a prospect goes quiet, because ghosting doesn't always mean a hard no, and how getting your process out of your head and into a documented system is one of the best things you can do for your business. So without further ado, let's dive in. Aryel, thank you so much for being here with me today on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. I'm so excited to dive into the prospecting process with you. Let's start with just like a big question. Why do you think a prospecting process is so important for advisors?
So the prospect process essentially establishes the relationship and how that's going to go. It kind of sets the tone. It sets the impression, like what are you going to be known for? And so it's really important to have a prospect process in place that gives exactly that relationship that how you want it to go, essentially. So how are you going to communicate? What's your consistency like? What's your tone? And it just really guides that prospect through, hopefully, to the yes, to the client onboarding, and then a really long, healthy, balanced relationship as between advisor and client.
Yeah, one thing that I feel like I've really learned from you, Aryel, is it's where you can establish whether or not you're going to lead the client or not. And I think that for most clients of advisors, they are really looking to that advisor to lead them through their wealth management and their retirement planning and their investment planning and their tax planning and all of these things that are really central to their well-being. Essentially, they're looking for that leadership. And so your prospect process is your chance to demonstrate how much of a leader you're really going to be, or maybe inadvertently communicate how you might not be leading them in the way that they want to be led.
Yeah, well, I think so. One of my favorite questions, so like if you use a scheduling system like Calendly, G Reminders, Acuity, whatever it is, one of my favorite questions that advisors should have on there is, why are you looking for a financial advisor? And giving them the opportunity to kind of give their little spiel, right? But I think that one of the things that people won't say, they'll say through, like, it's almost like a reading between the lines, is they're really looking for an accountability buddy. Honestly, they're looking for an accountability partner and a financial advisor to, as you said, lead them through, and not only lead them through, but also keep them accountable to do all the things that they need to do. So you could tell them to go get their estate planning done. And then what I've seen working in operations is it's not just, okay, go get your estate planning done, and then they go and do it. It's like, okay, have you done that? Can I help you find a lawyer? Okay, awesome. You've had a meeting. And a lot of the times, the client, when we see that we've, just for this example, when we've sent them to an estate planning lawyer, they'll actually come back and go, okay, so this is what the attorney said. What do you think? And it's building that trust. That trust starts long before they become a client. It starts in your prospect process of leading them through not only the process and how this goes and what that does, but I think a lot of that leads to those communications and the follow-up, the consistency, the accountability to, yes, lead them through the process, hold their hand, but also ensure, what are they doing? So how does that translate to the prospect process? Well, depending on what your process is, it's the, okay, so this is our next meeting. This is what we do. This is the prep that goes into that. And maybe they didn't schedule right away. Well, sometimes people just need reminders. We're all busy. We all have lives. We all have things going on, those external factors. And maybe they just weren't able to get to it right away. So then what's your follow-up sequence? And it's just a gentle reminder of, hey, didn't see anything scheduled. Just want to give you a friendly reminder. This is our next step. Here's a simple link on my calendar to schedule. And then most of the time, we see that happens.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that happens during the prospect process is not following up enough. And I think that a lot of that really stems from probably two different things is advisors are busy, right? And so it's sometimes hard to remember, like, how many times have I already followed up with this person? Has it been too much? Has it not been too much? Have I followed up with them at all? So just kind of that overwhelm. But then the second piece of it, I think, is that fear of being too pushy and not wanting to seem too salesy, seem too pushy, dare I say, even too desperate for a client, and forgetting that that's not actually what is coming across to the prospect when they're being followed up with. So let's talk about that. Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I think that's probably the biggest mistake. Would you agree with me? That's the biggest?
I definitely think it's up there, like top 3 for sure, with advisors. A mistake they're making in their prospect process is not having a follow up of, how do I follow up? What do I say? What's that communication look like? And when do I follow up? And keeping that consistent.
So what do you think is the solution to that?
Yeah, so I think it's exactly that, as you build in a follow-up sequence is, okay, so here's your process, here's your meetings, here's what it looks like to meet with a prospect before they say yes and you onboard them as a new client. And that could be, a big one I see is you have your introduction call, right? You take 20-30 minutes to get to know them. Why are they seeking a financial advisor? Your very basics to see, is it a good fit? And then you would probably have at least 1 or 2 other meetings after that to demonstrate your value. And the follow-up sequence is, okay, you've had the introduction call, but then what do you do from there? How are you scheduling them? If they don't schedule and go through your system, say you have like Calendly link to schedule meetings, what's your follow-up from there? So then you have an introduction call. You thought it was a great meeting. There was good chemistry. They'd be a good fit for a client, and vice versa. You'd be a good fit for them as their advisor, and you want to continue them through your prospect process. But how are you going to lead them? If they don't schedule, what's your follow-up to lead them to that next step? Where do you go from there?
I think another thing too that is really important here, it doesn't always have to be, okay, great, this was a great call. I'll follow up with you with a link to schedule our next meeting. You can end that call with them on the phone and get that next meeting scheduled. That's sometimes the easiest way for both parties to keep it moving forward and then not have to rely on tons of follow-ups. Now, you should still have the follow-up process there, because there are going to be some people who might say, you know what, I really just need to look at my calendar. Can you send me the link and I'll schedule when a time is good for me? And then that happens. And then of course you follow up with those people. But you can sometimes circumvent that entirely by just asking them to schedule the next call with you while they're still on that first one?
Well, I think you build your process in for both outcomes, is
Hmm.
scheduling on that call, that meeting with you. Because most of the times the advisors aren't going to be waiting weeks or months to schedule. It's going to be something where you meet on a Tuesday. Maybe you keep that consistency of meeting the next Tuesday. They obviously had availability at that time. And I think that consistency of kind of maybe meeting on the same day, same time, I actually find a lot for clients that they like that. Like when we go to schedule financial reviews, whether annually, biannually, whatever it is, quarterly, I always go look at what the client usually schedules, using our Calendly system, and that sets a trend, right? Like people like that kind of designated time slot. So you might find like a theme there with
Mm.
consistency across meeting times, but you build it in. So if they can schedule with you then in the meeting, great. If not, build it in where you send them the link and they schedule at their convenience. But having both options
Mm-hmm.
is probably going to lead to greater results of leading them to the next step and having that conversion from one step to another. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that advisors maybe are like, well, I'm not going to schedule, like that's an admin task, that's above me. Well, it's actually not above you. Yes, you can have your calendar managed by admin, ops, whatever it is, a virtual assistant, but you're actually kind of showing like personality or like relatability when you're able to be like, hey, let's just go ahead and schedule. I've got, my calendar ready to go. You could pick a date and time. And then maybe you're not the one that's actually going through Calendly and scheduling it. You can then send it to your assistant or your admin ops, whatever it is that you use, and they can actually put it in. But I don't think you're above just simply taking a moment to open your calendar, finding something that works, and then letting your operations lead from there to actually get it booked and scheduled on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things that come to mind, like two other mistakes that have just popped into my
Yes.
head as I've been hearing you talk through. And so I'm like, okay, which one do I want to cover first? And I actually think let's stick with the follow-ups first before we move on. Because I think a lot of times, especially in today's age, especially members of the millennial generation, maybe some Gen X too, we're like email, email, email. I'm going to follow up by email. I know you have some thoughts about this. Is email always the best way to follow up, especially for this type of relationship?
Is an email a way to communicate? Yes. But are there so many other forms of ways to communicate? Yes. And so I don't think that relying in your follow up sequence that you build out, because again, it goes back to how am I going to communicate? What is your script? What is your template? And then when. And both are really powerful items that go into that follow up sequence that you have to have figured out and balanced. And I think part of the how is how you communicate, not just what you say, but how you're saying it. And that goes into the communication part of, I don't think it's just about relying on email. I think you have to be willing to communicate in other forms. So we usually build into that follow up sequence a number of ways. It's going to be email first, it's going to be text next, and then I don't think advisors should be above a call, right? Because you're trying to build trust, you're trying to build rapport, relatability, and just kind of showing that you have a variety of ways that you can communicate, especially those calls, being willing to take that time out of your day to dial the phone, pick it up, and actually, you know, try to get a hold of them and chat with them, I think is a really powerful message. And, I think a lot of time you do get their voicemail, but I still think that that sends like a powerful message, being willing to communicate across a variety of ways. I've also seen advisors use Loom and do record Loom videos, and that can also
Mm.
be like a really powerful message as well. So there's just such a variety of ways. Like we're in the technological age. There's so many different ways to communicate. I don't think that we can hide behind the keyboard of just relying on email. I don't think that that sends your complete message of what you're capable of and that trust that you have to offer and your expertise. And so you have to kind of say what's out there for me to communicate and be able to, utilize those different channels.
Hmm. So what would you say to an advisor who does have that like hesitation, that kind of like, I'm not that type of person. I'm not going to be pushy. They know I'm here. They can reach out to me when they're ready. What would you say to that advisor?
Yeah. So you have to have your skin in the game, right? Like
Mhm.
so what I always say is like, you're a financial advisor, you are selling yourself.
Mm.
You are your product because you're the one that is the thought leadership. You're building the plans, you're executing the plans, you're implementing the plans, you're giving recommendations, you're following up on recommendations. You are your product. And so that hesitation, I think, comes from a space of, well, I don't want to be salesy, or if your follow-up sequence includes a call. There's so much hesitation around picking up the phone and doing that personal call. I see it all the time. And I see where, advisor is supposed to say they have, their calendar blocked for prospecting on a Tuesday morning. And it just gets pushed and pushed and pushed until Friday,
Mhm.
finally Friday at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're like, all right, I'm going to do it. They got the confidence. Well, I think number one, calling on a Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon is a lot better than a Friday afternoon, because then you give them the rest of the week to get back to you. Whereas if you do it on a Friday afternoon, it might be, so timing is everything. Friday, they'll have listened to it. The weekend has come. It's busy. They've done other things, and then they've forgotten about you. So timing definitely is important and plays into it. And I would just say again, like, yeah, there's hesitancy. It sucks to call people. That's not always comfortable, but that's why you build in scripts. You build
Mm.
in like communications ahead of time. So don't always make your call like your first step. It could be that email, the text, and then a call.
Mhm.
And then you're kind of showing like, hey, I am like, I think that kind of builds confidence, maybe, of like, hey, I've executed this, I've reached out, they've heard from me more times like before this call. I think that might build confidence and like your consistency, and then that you've communicated already before then, so they've heard from you. This is not the first time cold call. And I think sometimes you just have to kind of do it, because I have seen advisors just like recently, or actually more times than not, where that follow-up sequence actually leads to clients, where you have your follow-up sequence built in, and you have called them, they've heard from you, and then you're closing a $2 million client. You're closing a
Yeah.
$1 million client because of your follow-up that you've given, because you're showing that you care. You show that you are credible to follow up. You're credible to, I think it goes into a credibility. And so sometimes you just have to pick up the phone and just do it, because you just never know what that's going to lead. And honestly, Hillary, the more that an advisor picks up the phone and does it, the less intimidating it becomes.
Yeah.
Just getting started and doing something is better than doing nothing at all. And the more you do it, the more you just get really good at it, as if it was nothing, right? Practice makes perfect. I think it takes 20, 21 times to
Oh,
build something into a habit. So yeah, just getting started is one part of that. And then the more you do it, the better you get at it.
yeah.
Sorry, I totally
Okay.
ranted.
No, no, no. That was perfect. What I
Okay.
want to get into now is this idea of documenting the process, or the lack of documenting the process. Because I think
Oof.
what I've seen, and if I'm going to be completely transparent, I struggle with this in my own business sometimes, is thinking through like, okay, my process, I think I know what it is. It kind of lives in my head. I'm afraid to put it down on paper because I know that each person who comes through my process, there might be tiny little things that are different about each interaction. Is a process going to box me in and make it feel unnatural? Or am I going to look at it and then 3 months later, it's just going to be outdated? Like, let's talk about this idea of documenting the process.
Yeah. So a process is so important, especially when it comes to prospecting, because again, you are setting the tone for how the relationship is going to go. So
Mm.
if everything is up here and you're a busy advisor, you have clients, you have other, hopefully your pipeline is healthy and wealthy and you've got, prospect calls and prospect meetings, I'm not sure how you can keep track of all the things that you have to do as a business owner. Financial advisors wear many different hats. You're a wealth manager, you're a financial planner, you're a business owner, you're the think tank. You have all these things that you're doing. And then you also have like a personal life. You probably have a family, you might be married, you might have kids, you might have networking that you do, you have friends, you have family. Like, it's insane what financial advisors, like, the hats that they wear. So like, compliments to advisors, and especially like RIA owners and,
Mm-hmm.
solo practitioners, or maybe you're managing a small team. Like, there's so many things. So a process is so important because it gives you predictability where
Mm-hmm.
it's needed. So yes, you have the process in your head. You're afraid to put it on paper because that seems so rigid. But actually, I think what it's doing is it's taking it off of you. It's taking it off of the advisor, that pressure to keep the process moving, and putting that on someone else, putting that on a system, putting that on your staff, putting that into place actually frees up your time to be able to focus and do the things that you're really good at. It's not sending a text, it's not sending an email, it's not inputting data into your CRM. It's being focused on driving value for your clients and focusing on those advisor related activities that only you can do, that only you're responsible for.
It really, well, one thing that I heard you say, maybe not in these words, but I'm going to repeat it back, is it reduces your mental load like
Yes.
significantly. And it makes the process highly delegatable, if that's a word.
Yes.
And so it means that you don't have to be working the process yourself 100% of the time. You have maybe other people on your team, whether it's a VA or a CSA or somebody who is working the process for you. And it might still look like the whole process is being worked from you as well. Like maybe they're sending out those communications, but those communications are still coming from you.
Yes. You let your system lead your process instead of you leading the process. Because I think what happens is when the advisor keeps it up here in their head, there's almost this factor that plays into of reinventing the wheel every time. And I think it goes
Hmm.
into not only your process and what you do and how you deliver it, but also in what you're communicating as well. I've seen a lot of advisors go to send a, you know, follow-up email to a prospect that, they had an intro call with them, it went great, and then they maybe forgot about the prospect following up because they got busy. There's other things that were happening. They're running a business, and it's been a few weeks since they've reached out, and it's a pop in the head of like, oh shoot, I had a great call with that prospect. Now I got to follow up with them. So it's not only in the timing of that relying on the advisor of it being up here, but then it's you go to send the email. Okay, well, I've sent this email before. I'm going to copy and paste it from a prospect and send it. Well, then an hour, 2 hours goes by because then you're now evaluating your email. Even though you've sent it
Hmm.
before, you go to rewrite it. You're thinking about, well, man, how do I drive value with this prospect? And what do I say based on how the conversation went? And you're reinventing the wheel there and in what you're communicating. And then also in your process. So it's also like, okay, I've carried out my process this way before, but what if there's something better? Like, what should I be doing different? I just always think there's a reevaluating what you're doing and what you're saying. And it really just, I don't want to say waste time, but takes away time from other areas that you could be spending. Whereas if it was out of your head, in paper, in your CRM, systematized, the systems are driving your process, and you're not being relied on to do that. Just how much time that frees up, thought,
Hmm.
mental load, time to do other things. It's just crazy the transformation that can be made when your process is systematized and documented.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just documented in like a Word doc, but also then built into your CRM, whether it's Wealthbox or Redtail or Advisant or whatever.
Yes, workflows, templates,
Mm-hmm.
automation, all of that. You just get a lot of time back. And then you're running like a well oiled machine because it's not relying on you to keep that going. It's just it's order of operations. And you have that order
Mm-hmm.
of operations in a place that, moves it along within your
Yeah,
systems.
absolutely. Okay, so last big mistake that I want to cover in this conversation is, let's say that somebody starts to ghost. The follow ups have happened, the next meeting has not been scheduled, or the decision to become a client has not been made. There's been no hard no, but they've just ghosted.
Yeah.
I think a mistake that you and I often see is they ghost, you ghost, they're gone. But there's one more thing that you can do to keep them kind of in the system and nurtured for when they do come back around and they are ready to start the relationship. Do you want to share what that is?
Yeah. And I'm actually going to speak to something else on this too. So, yeah. So, we don't just build the follow ups in the prospect process for scheduling meetings, but yes, if someone ghosts you essentially, doesn't reply, doesn't respond, it doesn't mean that they're not seeing your communications. So once you've done the follow-ups for your actual process or your meetings you're going through, you build out a nurture sequence, just as you said, is you still nurture that lead over, whatever the timeline is, whether that's 2, 3, 4 emails, text calls, whatever it is. You set up a nurture sequence. So even though they're maybe out of your process, but they're still in your pipeline and you're still in their inbox essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
that still gives you an opportunity to keep yourself top of mind with that client or with that prospect. Maybe they got busy, maybe they've got
Mm-hmm.
something going on, and it just keeps you relevant essentially. So not only do you do like a nurture sequence, but then maybe you do some marketing. Maybe you do a newsletter, maybe you do a blog, you do an email blast, whatever it is that allows you to keep yourself essentially relevant and still communicating. And like, even if they don't respond, they're seeing your stuff, they're seeing your
Mm-hmm.
communications. I also have seen advisors do quarterly follow-up calls or quarterly check-in calls. And I know we
Mm-hmm.
talked like calls suck, but I have seen advisors do that where they nurtured a prospect through a newsletter, through a blog announcement, and through check-in calls. And maybe they didn't come a client at that time that they initially reached out, but then you're closing that client and signing them with a yes a year later because you nurtured them over time, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's timing is different. One of my favorite things to do in all of this is kind of, we do like an audit, and we go through the leads that have come in and the different meetings that were scheduled. We basically look at the data of where your prospects landed. How far did they get in your process? But we also look at the timeline, and it's not going to be perfect. Like, through that data and through doing an audit, we'll see like an average. And I think that advisors maybe don't realize that it actually takes longer for prospects to become a client or say yes than we think. We think it's an
Mm-hmm.
easy, schedule a meeting, intro call one week, your collab meeting the next week, another collab meeting another week, and then they're saying yes. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always result in that manner. Your yeses aren't always going to be that easy. And so building
Mm-hmm.
in a nurture sequence is, again, credibility. It's showing you care. It's leading that prospect. And I think that you'll see that if you nurture that lead over time, you actually will result that in a yes because you cared enough to check in and follow up and be consistently in their, communications.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I think as I am thinking back through some data that I've heard recently as a marketer, is the sales cycle is only getting longer. And oftentimes for these really high trust relationships where you're asking someone to sign over essentially their life savings to you so that you can manage their investments for them and advise on something as big as their retirement planning transition and all of these things, someone is often not ready to say yes after 1, 2, 3 meetings. They need time to think about it. They need more time to interact with you. And so the sales cycle, it can go from being like 1 month to, like you said, as long as 12 months. Or
Yeah.
I've even heard longer than that before.
Yeah.
And so having that process built in where you can nurture someone for as many months as they need, I think is 100% worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you build it into your process, though. That's why you go, okay, when a lead comes in, how do I carry them through the life cycle, right, of that process? And so it's not just initially when you meet with them, it's what does that process look like? And how do you account for all scenarios of where a prospect might be and what they might say during that life cycle?
Yes. Well, Aryel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these mistakes that I know you have seen firsthand across multiple firms. This has been so enlightening.
Absolutely. It's such a fun, I mean, I get giddy at this because when a advisor, when I ask them like, oh, do you have a prospect process? And they go, well, I get super excited because I'm like, oh, we're going to change your life. We are going to make this so much better on you by putting a process in place. And I think that something that's so powerful about this, prospect process and, figuring out what it is, what to say, and getting it implemented is we actually had an opportunity to do that together. We did that with a firm because I have the operations brain and I can go, all right, this is, your sales process, and this is where we put the different communications, but that communications piece is where I needed a partner or I needed someone to bounce off and figure out what to say. And that's where you came in. And so we essentially, I identified in a firm that we needed to put this prospect process in place. And I had reached out to you and said, hey, Hillary, I need help with this. I need help with what to say, with the scripts, when to say it. What does that look like? And we built out a really BA prospect process that basically titles all scenarios with all different kinds of leads. And I think that that was a really powerful statement to, what's capable.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm so excited to bring this to more firms with you. It's going to be so much fun. So, anyone who's listening, Aryel and I are actually going to be hosting a roundtable at NAPFA next week in Minneapolis on, what is it? Is it May 9th?
Friday, May 8th.
Friday, May 8th. Yes, it's one of the Friday morning sessions. So we're going to be hosting a roundtable on this, helping advisors figure out kind of what their prospect process looks like right now and how could they make it better? Could they document it? Could they build those communication templates? Could they think about how they're leading their clients or their prospects through the process? So if you are going to be at NAPFA in Minneapolis next week, make sure to come and find us. We're so excited to be there. And then also for advisors who are not going to be at NAPFA, we're going to be hosting a virtual workshop the week after that. So I will link in the show notes to the registration page for that if you would like to come on and learn more about how to actually implement this into your own firm. Come and bring your questions. We'll be having a live Q&A, all of that stuff.
Yay! It's going to be awesome. I'm so excited to geek out with you on this. It's going to be great.
Yes. And that is going to be on May 12th. So mark your calendar. The registration page is in the link. Aryel, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, Hillary. I've had a great time. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.